Roboy Yasuna Miyipi Maribusu Da 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 Mahina Oh ila da 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 Moi Viapai Yasamai Viapai Yasamai Migoi Gulisu Da 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 da
Shalom, my dear friends. Shalom. Today, the 28th day of the month of Sivan of the year 5777, 22nd of June 2017. Here for what will be our last study session today for a couple of months before, God willing, we resume with the help of God, on Sunday, August 27th, which will be the 5th of Elul, which will be 9 weeks away. I will, during that period, with the help of God, be offering some Shavua Tov live hookups, which will be advertised on azamra.org website and also in the weekly diary. And there will be a hookup, God willing, this coming Sunday, the 25th of June, at the broadcast time of 1800 hours Israel time. And that, again, will be sent out in the Azamra and Kollel weekly email going out immediately after this coming Shabbat, and subsequent Shavua Tov hookups during the recess of our main study program will go out in the weekly updates. Now, today is for me a day of tremendous thanksgiving to Hashem, ruler of the universe, to be able today to make a siyum of 2 major projects that have exercised us in a year in which we have indeed been studying some other major projects as well, since we first started these studies last July in the month of Tammuz of the preceding year. And now here we are on the threshold of the next Tammuz, the Tammuz of this year, 5777, starting on Rosh Chodesh, Friday night, this coming Saturday and Sunday, Rosh Chodesh Tammuz. And we've covered in this year in the Tanakh, the whole book of Daniel, from beginning to end in the Hebrew text. We have covered about a third of Sefer Mishlei, a couple of other prophetic passages, and also now coming today to the conclusion of our studies of Job. And likewise in the Mishnah, we have, thank God, had some major accomplishments with the study of Masechet Sanhedrin, Masechet Makot, dealing with the penalty of lashings and other subjects. Likewise, Horayot, the concluding section of the laws of Bet Din and of dissent from the opinions of Bet Din. We have studied Masechet Chulin, Tractate Chulin, the entire tractate, and now we are at the end of 24 chapters of Masechet Shabbat. And in order to be able to give an open time frame for the discussions today about Sefer Iyov, as we conclude our studies in Iyov, I would like today to begin with the Mishnah study, likewise a conclusion of really several months of study. This, I believe, is up to number 56 in the I think this is number 49 in the classes in the series on Shabbat, and we're at 56 on the book of Job. That's 56 sessions. That's really quite a lot, thank God. And it's with enormous pleasure now that we turn today to the Mishnah, to tractate Shabbat. Shalom. Today, the 28th day of the month of Sivan of the year 5777, corresponding to the 22nd of June of the year 2017. And we come today to our concluding session in Masechet Shabbat, Tractate Shabbat, reaching the end of chapter 22, chapter 24, the last two Mishnahs concluding the Masechta on a note almost as mysterious as the note on which we entered the Masechta. And let us now turn to the Mishnah 4 of chapter 24 of Tractate Shabbat, to the Hebrew text, which continues with the theme we were looking at in the previous session. The previous Mishnahs were talking about feeding of animals on the Shabbat, and it's an obligation on the owner of the animals to feed his animals on the Shabbat, however, not to go further with any extra tircha, any extra effort that would not be consonant with the spirit of the Shabbat, only to do what is essential. So Mishnah 4, Machatchin es adluyim lifnei ha-Behemoth. One may cut up the pumpkins in front of the animal to feed the animal. V'es anevelo lifnei aklovim. And likewise the nevela, an animal that had died, and was now going to be, since it had not been slaughtered in a kosher way, it's going to be cut up and given to the dogs to feed the dogs. Cutting up of the deluim, the pumpkins, would normally be considered human food. But where necessary to provide the animal with food from these pumpkins on the Shabbat, it is permitted to cut them up for the animal. That is presupposing that the deluim were cut off from the ground before the Shabbat. They may not be cut out of the ground on the Shabbat, since we are not permitted to bring to a halt the life of any plant on the Shabbat. So these would be pumpkins that had been cut ready from before the Shabbat, and here, for the sake of feeding the animal, it's permitted to do this. And likewise, says the Tanakama, where an animal has died and the owner is allowed to cut up the animal to feed the dogs. That is the opinion of the Tanakama. V'es hanevelo lifnei aklovim. One may cut up the nevela animal in front of the dogs to feed them. Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yehuda has a dissenting opinion. If this animal had not been a nevela, that is to say, it was still alive from before the Shabbat, asuro, it will be forbidden to cut it up on the Shabbat for the dogs if the animal had suddenly died on the Shabbat. Lefi she'eino min hamuchon, because it is not from that which is ready and prepared for the Shabbat. Since the animal had been alive before the Shabbat, according to the way of thinking of Rabbi Yehuda, at that time the animal was not considered by the owner to be likely to die, even if there was a chance of it, but the person had designated that animal for himself. When the animal now dies on the Shabbat and is fit only for the consumption of the dogs, that animal, according to Rabbi Yehuda, has become muktzeh because it was not available from before the Shabbat. It only became available on the Shabbat. It's like something that's been born, a new development on the Shabbat, and is considered in the category of muktzeh by Rabbi Yehuda. Eino min hamuchon, it was not something that was prepared for use on the Shabbat. That is in opposition to the opinion of the Tanakama, that once the animal died, it's fit for the dogs and may be fed to them on the Shabbat. So that relates to actions for the feeding of animals on the Shabbat. Now the closing Mishnah deals with a number of different collected issues, and thus ends the tractate with mystery, just like the tractate began. The mystery of tractate Shabbat, which started with the vignette of the poor man standing at the window of the Balabait's house, the householder's house, and there's an exchange going on between them of the loaf of bread and determining whether that was in breach of the malacha of hotza'ah, hachnasa, taking out or bringing in from private domain to public domain or public domain to private domain. That was where the tractate started. Now the tractate ends with, in our Mishnah 5, first of all, questions relating to the annulment of oaths on the Shabbat. Mefirin nedorim b'Shabbos. They may annul oaths on the Shabbos. V'nish'olin lidevorim shehein letzorich haShabbos. They may also literally be asked in relation to matters that are for the sake of the Shabbat. Here we have two separate laws in relation to nedarim. Nedarim are oaths where an individual may take upon himself that for him this item, be it for example wine or meat, is in the category of forbidden. Just like a temporal dedicated sacrifice is forbidden to an individual, so this person designates even permitted items like wine or meat or some other luxury, for example, as in the category of forbidden for himself or herself. And we find in Leviticus chapter 30, at the beginning of the penultimate parasha of the book of Numbers, beginning of Matos, that the Torah begins with the laws relating to the annulment of vows. And this may be done in two ways, both of which are present in our Mishnah now. Our Mishnah is telling us that these, where necessary, may be annulled on the Shabbat. The first part of the Mishnah, Mefirin nedorim b'Shabbos. They may annul vows on the Shabbat. The expression in the Mishnah of Mefirin refers specifically to the scenarios mentioned there in Book of Numbers, chapter 30, where a girl, if she is in her father's house, and she is not betrothed, then when she makes vows, the father has the ability to nullify her vows. If she becomes betrothed, then the father can only annul her vows together with the man that has betrothed his daughter. If she is a married woman, then the husband has the ability to nullify certain vows that his wife might make to forbid herself, for example, things that are going to cause him a great deal of effort to replace with other things, or if she makes some vow that relates to their relationship together, if she were, for example, to vow not to wear perfume or cosmetics and the like that would affect their relationship, you can nullify such vows. And in these cases where a father nullifies the oath of his daughter, or where the husband nullifies the oath of his wife, this may be done according to the letter of the Torah law only on the day that the father and or the husband or betrothed hear the oath. It has to be done on one and the same day that they find out about the oath. And for that reason, if they both find about the oath, the father and or the husband or the betrothed, if they only heard about it on the Shabbat, they must nullify it on the Shabbat for them to exercise their authority to nullify the vows of this woman or girl, because otherwise they won't be able to do so after the Shabbat. For that reason, they may nullify the vows of daughter and or betrothed or wife on the Shabbat. Now, when the Mishnah turns to the second part of this phrase, v'nish'olin lidevorim, nish'olin is the nif'al, the passive of the word sha'al, where the person wants to ask if there's some way to undo their vow. This is not a woman that is daughter or wife. This is a person that's made a vow and has discovered later on that the vow causes them serious problems. And in such a case, according to the oral law, learned out from the portion in Matos at the end of Numbers 30, which is addressed to the princes of Israel. Those who are truly the princes, the judges, it is possible to go to a truly wise Torah sage and or a bet din and to ask for a way to get out of the vow. And the bet din will ask about the circumstances of the vow and will discover that if the person had known about the difficult problem that would arise through his taking this vow, he would not have made the vow. And for that reason, the vow is considered invalid from the start. And where the person, for example, had made a vow not to eat tomorrow, forgetting that tomorrow is going to be Shabbat, and he finds himself on the Shabbat where it's a mitzvah to eat, and he can't eat because he took the vow, for such a thing, Nish'alin Devarim, he would be able to go to the wise men or the sages to ask to have the vow that he made not to eat on the Shabbat nullified, and that way he can now eat on the Shabbat. That would be an example of a vow that can be nullified in such a way by an individual going to the wise man or the bet din. This may also be done on the Shabbat, where it's for the purpose of the Shabbat. That is to say, in other tractates speaking about the laws of the festivals, Yom Tov and Chol HaMoed, we found out about various legal transactions that may or may not be done on the festival, including Kiddushin, the betrothal of a woman, and Gerushin, and various other things. And here we are in the case of Shabbat, learning about the things that involve no actual malacha. It's all about words. The vow is words, and nullifying the vow is also words, but words which would not normally be allowed to pass on the Shabbat except in these circumstances where they are needed. And with that, we turn to the continuation of the 5th Mishnah. Pokakin es hamoor. It's permitted to stop up the moor, that is the window that gives light into the room. Pokakin es hamoor. We're allowed to stop it up. This is actually a law that we've already heard in our Mishnah in chapter 17, in Mishnah 7, where it speaks also about the permissibility of stopping up the window that is not considered to be a form of a binyan, of building. We are here really hearing an introduction to the mysterious ending that is to come. These are introductory bits of information. Yes, you may stop up the window. Umoidin es hamatlis. It's permitted to measure a little rag. The reason why one might need to measure the size of a rag is that if the rag is less than the size of 3 finger breadths square, then it is not susceptible to receive tum'ah, defilement, be it from contact with the dead or from contact with a sheretz, a dead reptile or mouse or the like. If the rag does not have a certain minimal size, it would not receive tum'ah, and nor would it convey tum'ah if it touched something else. So our Mishnah is telling us that it would be permitted to measure the matlis, this little bit of cloth, because if it were the requisite size, and for example, it were tameh, it were ritually impure, as for example, if an impure creature dead had touched it, that means that if the rag then went on to touch food of some kind, for example, food of a sacrificial offering or food of the trumah, priestly tribe, that would render those to be inedible. The moment the rag, which is tameh, touches the food, it would render it to be inedible. And our Mishnah is telling us that the measurement to find out the status of any such rag, to find out what effects that might have on other things that touched it, measuring that, which is measurement of a mitzvah, is permitted on the Shabbat. Normally on the Shabbat we would not start measuring things. You don't measure fabrics to make suits and dresses, and you don't measure out specifically flour for a dough, because we can't make garments on Shabbat, and we can't bake on the Shabbat. But here, where the measurement is for the sake of a mitzvah, and likewise with the continuation of the mitzvah, v'es amikveh, it's permissible to measure the mikveh to find out if it has the requisite amount of water required for a person to immerse and have purification from their impurity. And there is a minimal size of mikveh, which is estimated by our sages to be 3 cubic amot. That is to say, an amma is the distance from the average person's middle of their index finger until their elbow. And 3 of those deep and 1 amma by 1 amma square. The amma is normally translated into English as the cubit. So 1 by 1 by 3 amot, that is to say 3 cubic amot, 3 would be water that a person could immerse in crouching down and have their entire body simultaneously covered in water without any part of their body being outside of the water, which would render the tevilah to be invalid. So here our Mishnah has started this final section by telling us about measurement on the Shabbat. And our sages always relish and treasure ma'aseh, some action that displayed these halachot being put into action, as happens in the case of something that happened in the days of these sages mentioned in our Mishnah, the final section of Tractate Shabbat. U'ma'aseh b'yimei oviv shel Rabbi Tzodok. There was a ma'aseh, an actual incident where it happened in practice. They did it. They ruled this way. They did the following. B'yimei oviv shel Rabbi Tzodok. It was in the days of the father of Rabbi Tzodok. That was already a few generations back. They knew Rabbi Tzadok. They heard about his father, and here's what happened in those days. Uvimei Abu Shul ben Botnis, likewise, in that generation there was the outstanding sage Abu Shaul ben Botnis, quoted elsewhere in the Mishnah, as is Rabbi Tzadok. And here's what they did. Shepokaku es hamo'or b'tofiach. They stopped up the window with a tofiach, earthenware little pot. V'koshru es a mekedo bagemi. They also tied up the mekedo, another kind of earthenware pot of a specific size, for reasons we shall hear presently. They tied it with a gemi, with a long leaf of a reed. Leda, in order to know, im yesh bagigis poiseach tefach, if there was in the gigis, big shard of a broken pot, poiseach tefach, a crack, that was poiseach tefach, the side of the opening of a tefach, that is to say, a tefach is a handbreadth, the breadth of 4 fingers. And they wanted to know if this crack was actually larger than a poiseach tefach, if you could get a cubic tefach through the imlav or not, for reasons we shall discuss in a moment. Umidivreihem lomadnu, from their words we have learned shepoikekin, that it is permitted to stop up the windows, umoidedin, and it's possible to measure for the case of a mitzvah, v'koisrin b'Shabbos, and also one may knot in a designated way. One may tie a knot. We've already learned earlier that you cannot tie professional knots on the Shabbat, the knots of a sailor or the knots of a camel driver and the like. Those may not be tied on the Shabbat. But where the knot is made in what is clearly a temporary way, like here with the reed, which is actually suitable for animal food, and the person therefore is not going to just leave it there after he's tied the knot. He will later take it to feed to the animal. They needed temporarily to use this reed to tie the pot on the Shabbat, and now let us watch what they were actually doing. The story is that there was a little gap running between two houses, and the gap ran between one house and the other. In one of the houses, someone had died on the Shabbat. Now, the two houses both had windows on each side of this tiny alleyway. Between them, windows, and above the alleyway, covering over the alleyway, was the gigis, the remains of a large pot, which had a crack running all the way down the middle. And the whole purpose of this venture, there are a number of factors involved. The whole purpose of this venture is to protect the house that is neighbors to the place where the dead body is, to protect the neighboring house from the impurity coming from the dead body and flying out of the window of that house through the alleyway. And if the gigis, the little covering, has a crack, as we shall see, the impurity would go out of the window and fly out of the crack. But if the gigis had only a narrow crack, less than a handbreadth size, then the impurity is going to stay under this ohel, this tent, and it's going to go flying into the other house unless the neighboring house has this pot stuffed in there to stop the impurity flying in. Here it is, we are left at the conclusion of Masechet Shabbat with this very intricate law that involves the basic laws of Tum'at Met, the impurity of the dead. Again, to get this straight, there is a law that a Kohen, anyone from the family of the Kohanim, is not allowed to be in a building where there is Tumat Met, where the defilement from the dead has entered. And this need not be only where there is a dead body or a part of a body in that same house, but even if there is a neighboring house that has a body, there's some way for the defilement from the dead, the Tum'ah, to travel out of the house where the dead body is and fly in through the window of the other house, in which case the Kohanim would not be allowed to be there. Now, our Mishnah tells us that Pakaku es amo'or b'tofiach. The first thing they did, the window, the ma'or, the light hole in the wall of the neighbors, that window would have allowed the tum'ah to fly into it if there was not a crack in the gigit. And to prevent that, they stuck in the tofiach, which is a pottery vessel, a pot made of earthenware. And the reason they did it this way, with the bottom of the pot sticking outwards, was because there is a law by Tumas Kalim, by the defilement that may attach to utensils and vessels, that where the pot is made of earthenware, it does not become defiled by impurity from its backside, but only from its inside. Learned out from the relevant section of Parashat Shemini in Leviticus. only from its toch, its inside, but not from its achorayim, its outside. So their first venture was to stuff the window so that the tumah should not be able to fly into the house if it turns out there's not a crack. But this was only a temporary measure because they're going to need the pot in the other house. So what they then did was to try to measure how big indeed was the crack. As we've said, if the crack is less than 1 tefach, then the gigis part is serving as an ohel over the alleyway, and any spirit of tumah flying out from the house where the dead body is will fly under the ohel, and if there's no topiach in the other window, it'll fly into the other house, and the kohanim will have to leave. So here's how they measure this gigis, which is too high for them to access on the Shabbat. So they take a pole and they tie the makedo part with a gemi, the reed. Why did they use the makeda part? Because they knew that the makeda part is the size of a tefach al tefach. The size of the makeda is a tefach. So if the crack is less than a tefach, it won't go through. If the crack is a tefach or more, it will go through. Once it's a tefach or more, if the crack is absolute running from one end of the gigis to the other, along the line of the alleyway, then the tumah would not be transferred under it to the other side, go flying up through the hole and flying to wherever it flies. This is one of the great mysteries of the laws of tumah and tahara, that the spirit of tumah has the power to fly out of a window, and it will always fly out the first opportunity it has of a tefach al tefach, that it this is what they were trying to find out. Im yesh bagigis poisech tefach, the expression of our sages of the exit of required for the spirit of tumah to leave is poisech tefach, literally the opening up of the tefach. That you can get the tefach out. It's a handbreadth. It will let a handbreadth go through it. So that was what they were measuring for. The reason, as we've said, they had to do it with the gemi, with the reed, was because they couldn't use a regular rope or string that would be muktzeh on the Shabbat if it had not been prepared for tying on the Shabbat. Here the gemi, which is a reed, is fit for animal consumption, and that's why it is not muktzeh, and that's why they could tie the makedo, little pot, to the pole. And this way they could lift up the makedo pot to check if there was indeed a tefach-wide crack in the gigis. That means the tumah would fly out through that crack, not go across to the window even without the tafiach part stuffed through it. They would then be able to take out the tafiach part from the window of the neighboring house without any fear of violating the Shabbat. And it's on this point that Mishnah Shabbat ends with this introduction to the laws of Tumah and Tara, opening up a whole new horizon for us in the intricacy and the subtlety of the laws of Shabbat. Umidivrehem lomadnu, and from their words we have learned, shepoikikinu moidedin v'koshrin b'Shabbos, we may indeed stop up a window where necessary. Umoidedin, we may measure. V'koshrin, we may tie a temporary knot. Likewise, we do this when we roll up the Sefer Torah in the synagogue after the Torah reading, and we tie a knot around to keep it secure, a temporary knot. V'koshrin b'Shabbos, it is permitted to tie a knot on Shabbat. And with that, we now conclude our study of Masechet Shabbat in the Mishnah. Hadaran aloch Masechet Shabbat v'hadarach alon. Our glory is upon you, Masechet Shabbat, and your glory is upon us. Datan aloch Masechet Shabbat, v'datech alon. Our thoughts are upon you, Masachet Shabbat, and your thoughts are with us, your wisdom is with us. Lo nisnashe minoch, Masachet Shabbos, v'lo sisnashe minon, lo ba'alma hadein, v'lo ba'alma da'asi. Let us not forget you, Masachet Shabbat, and do not forget us, Masachet Shabbat, not in this world, nor in the world to come. May it be your will, Lord our God and God of our fathers, that your Torah should be our craft, our occupation in this world, and shall be with us in the world to come. Chanina bar Papa, Rami bar Papa, Nachman bar Papa, Achai bar Papa, Abba Meri bar Papa, Rafram bar Papa, Rochish bar Papa, Surcha bar Papa, Ada bar Papa, Doro bar Papa. May it be your will, Lord our God, to sweeten upon us the words of your Torah in our mouths and the mouths of your people, the children of Israel, the house of Israel. And we should all of us and our offspring and the offspring of all of your people Israel, all of us knowing your name and studying your Torah. Give me wisdom against my enemies. Your commandments give me the wisdom against my enemies, for your mitzvah is eternal. Let my heart be pure in your statutes, in order that I should not be ashamed. I shall never forget your commandments, for through them you give me life. Baruch ato Adonai lamdeni chokecha. Blessed are you, O Lord. Teach me your statutes. Amen, amen, amen. Selo voed. Amen, forever and ever. So with thanks to God, we have indeed now concluded Masachet Shabbat, and with that we'll take a brief interval, my friends, and in just a few moments we'll come back and also look at Sefer Iyov, with now having reached the end of this, and also discuss the idea of the Leviathan and of the Behemoth. So we're back in just a few minutes after a short interval.
Israel.
na 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 Heiliger Shabbos na 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 Heiliger Shabbos na 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 da 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 moy ahoy ahoy yom da 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 Heiliger Shabbos na 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 Heiliger Shabbos na 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 moy da 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 do. We vai, we vai, we vai, we vai, we vai. Shabbos koidesh, bebe Shabbos koidesh, Shabbos koidesh, bebe Heiliger Shabbos. Heiliger Shabbos we vai, we vai, we vai, we vai, we vai. We Shabbos koidesh, we Shabbos koidesh, Shabbos koidesh, Heiliger Shabbos. Tini na 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 no. Heiliger Shabbos, yain la 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 moina yada. Heiliger Shabbos. Da 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 da, moy doy da da da, moy doy da da. Heiliger Shabbat. Heilige Shabbos, la 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 la, Heilige Shabbos, la 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 la, Heilige Shabbos, la 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 la, Heilige Shabbos.
Shalom, my dear friends. Shalom. Now for the concluding session of our classes in this series, and with the help of God, my plan is to resume on Sunday, August 27th, corresponding to the 5th of Elul, and my plan is to study Shir HaShirim, the text of Song of Songs of King Solomon, and with the help of God, teachings of Rabbi Nachman according to a schedule which will be announced with the help of God in due course. And for now, let us turn to the study of the book of Iyov, which today, with praise and thanks to God, we are concluding. Let us turn now to the text, to consider in a broader manner the remarkable work that today, with the 56th class of this series, we conclude. Shalom, today the 28th day of the month of Sivan of the year 5777, corresponding to the 22nd of June of the year 2017. And having in our previous session completed our study of the Hebrew text of the book of Job, Sefer Iyov, after over 50 sessions in this study, with introductions from the Kabbalah and from Nachmanides, and through to the study of every chapter and verse of the Hebrew text. Today, let us consider in a broader manner the two great creatures that are depicted at the end of the book of Job, and then come to a broader look at what we are to gain, what we can gain from this remarkable work. Let us start with the words of Rabbi Meir, quoted in the Talmud at the very end of the in Masechet Berachot, Daf Yud Zayin Amud Bes, page 17b. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ki abam sam Rabbi Meir Sefer Iyov. Rabbi Yochanan used to say, Rabbi Yochanan, the great 3rd century Amora of the land of Israel, the author of the Jerusalem Talmud, he used to say, when Rabbi Meir would conclude the book of Job, he would say as follows: Sof Adam Lamus, the end of man is to die. Sof Behemoth L'shchito, the end of an animal is to be slaughtered. V'akoret Lemisa Oimdim, all are standing there for death. Happy is he that his toil is in the Torah, and that he creates nachas ruach, satisfaction to his maker. Godel b'shem tov, v'nifta b'shem tov, he grows with a good name and he leaves the world with a good name. There are a number of other passages in Talmud where we have quoted the words of one or other of the great sages, when they would finish one or other of the books, when they would reach this or that point in a book, which to my mind indicates that indeed they would actually go in a constant cycle around the books of the Tanakh, starting one after the other in an endless cycle, getting to the end, starting again at the beginning, and that's how they would come each time to finish a particular book with a particular incisive remark about that book. Here Rabbi Meir telling us about the absolute foundation of this holy work, that is to instill in us the fear of God. Well, before coming to a more general look at the book of Eov, let us then focus on these two mysterious animals which come into the second ma'aneh of God, the second address of God to Job from the Sa'ara, from whirlwind, stormwind prophecy, the Behemoth, the creature called the Behemoth, the collective of the animals, and the Leviathan, which, as we've seen, both are mentioned elsewhere in the holy writings, in the Psalms, Behemoth and Leviathan. Also, Isaiah mentions the Leviathan and the overthrow of Leviathan at the end of the days, associating Leviathan with the worldly empires, and Behemoth is a kind of universal force. The Leviathan is, of course, a sea creature, and the Behemoth is a land creature, and here is some kind of primal battle between the forces of the land and of the sea. Our Talmud, our Babylonian Talmud, comes to a collection of traditions about the Leviathan and the Behemoth in the tractate of Bava Basra, and it's on the Daf Ein Dalet, that is folio page 74, on the B side of the page, launching into a lengthy agados, or collection of agadot, going into many different aspects of the legends about these creatures. In other words, the actual creature as depicted in the book of Job, as we've gone through the pshat, is to be taken clearly as a mashal, like the whole book is, as a parable, as an extended metaphor. And these two creatures that are so fearsome, and particularly the Leviathan that is depicted as being completely impregnable and is appointed by God as king over all of the world and of all of the creatures, is completely fearless. This is clearly intended to be allegorical in the text, and our sages, in giving expression to these various agadot, are in some way trying to help us comprehend what part do these creatures play in the creation, on whatever level they are. According to the Kabbalah, these are embodifications, anthropomorphic descriptions of attributes of God through which God rules the world, where in the Kabbalah the Leviathan is variously associated with the Malchut and or with the Sphira of Yesod. In either case, at the very bottom of the tree of the Sphirot that connect the lower realms with God, and these are creatures through whom the direct providence of God is exercised. These fearsome creatures, fearsome because indeed the real power of God is completely fearsome. A very good article on the way that Leviathan and Behemoth have been viewed in the rabbinical sources is available online from the Jewish Encyclopedia, an article that was written in 1904 called Leviathan and Behemoth, which really summarizes the different views of these creatures. in later generations, the scholars wanted to say that the Behemoth was some kind of water ox or hippopotamus, and that the later scholars considered that the Behemoth and Leviathan were two primeval monsters which have parallels, according to the later scholars, in Babylonian mythology. But in rabbinical literature, this article summarizes, according to a midrash, the Leviathan was created on the 5th day of creation, and originally God produced a male and a female Leviathan, but lest in multiplying the species should destroy the world, he slew the female, reserving her flesh for the banquet that will be given to the righteous on the advent of the Mashiach. That is included in Bava Basra, Daf Ayin Daled Amud Aleph. And the enormous size of the Leviathan is illustrated by Rabbi Yochanan, from whom most of the Agadot concerning Leviathan proceeded. And let's remember that Rabbi Yochanan was receiving the tradition both from Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi and also of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai of the Kabbalah. He describes how once we went in a ship and saw a fish that put its head out of the water and that had horns, on which it's written, "I'm one of the meanest creatures that inhabit the sea. I'm 300 miles in length, and enter this day into the jaws of the Leviathan." So the Leviathan's food was already 300 miles in length. When the Leviathan is hungry, reports Rabbi Dimi in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, he sends forth from his mouth a heat so great as to make all the waters of the deep boil. And if he would put his head into paradise, no living creature could endure the odor of him. His abode is in the Mediterranean Sea, and the waters of the river Jordan fall into his mouth. So that's a passage in the Talmud in Tractate Bechorot, and also here in Bava Basra. And we have a tradition coming from Rabbi Eliezer, who was on a voyage in the company of Rabbi Yoshua, and Rabbi Yoshua was awake while Rabbi Eliezer was asleep. Rabbi Yoshua suddenly was terrified by the appearance of a brilliant light. He woke up Rabbi Eliezer, who said to him, "What is this, Rabbi Yoshua?" And Rabbi Yoshua told him he'd be terrified by this light. Rabbi Eliezer explained to him, it's probably the light that proceeded from the eyes of the Leviathan, and referred his Rabbi Yoshua to a verse in Job, chapter 41, verse 18, "By his sneezings does a light shine, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the morning." Nevertheless, there is a midrash in Tractate Shabbat 77b that despite his supernatural strength, the Leviathan is afraid of a small worm called the kilbit that clings to the gills of the large fishes and kills them. Now, with regard to the literature about the place of Moshiach in the times of Moshiach, we have the midrash that in time of Moshiach, God will make a banquet out of the flesh of the Moshiach. Rabbi Yohanan says at the time of the resurrection, a banquet will be given by God to the righteous, at which the flesh of the Leviathan will be served. Even the hunting of the Leviathan will be a source of great enjoyment to the righteous. Those, says Rabbi Judah Bar Shimon, Rabbi Yudan Bar Simon, those who have not taken part in pagan sports, they alone will be allowed to participate in the hunting of the Leviathan and of the Behemoth. Gabriel will be charged with the killing of the monster, but he will not be able to accomplish his task without the help of God, who will divide the monster with his sword. According to another Agadah, when Gabriel fails, God will order the Leviathan to engage in a battle with the ox of the mountain, the Shor Habar, which is another name seemingly for the Behemoth, which will result in the death of both of them. That tradition is brought in Bava Basra, page 75a, also in the Midrash Pesikta. Not only will the flesh of the Leviathan furnish food from the table of the righteous, but there will be a great supply of it in the markets of Jerusalem. From the hide of Leviathan, God will make tents for the pious of the first rank, girdles for those of the second rank, chains for those of the third, necklaces for those of the fourth. The remainder of the hide will be spread on the walls of Jerusalem, and the whole world will be illuminated by its brightness. Well, much discussion among the early writers and the later writers about the meaning of all this, and also quotes from the writings of the Gnostics that I do not intend to go into. It's well known that these creatures are also mentioned in the Christian writings and Revelations and other works held to have allusions to them. But let us turn to a discourse given by the Rebbe of Lubavitch back in the month of Tammuz of the year 5711, which means that it was in the year 1951. And the Rebbe is discussing about why the decision to send the spies into the land of Israel was dependent on the initiative of Moshe Rabbeinu, and what would have been Moshe's rationale for sending the spies, given that he knew that the entrance and conquest of the land of Israel would be miraculous in nature. The Rebbe explains that the entrance into the land of Israel first and foremost represented the beginning of the practical mitzvot. The Rebbe then explains that it's written in Likutei Torah from the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Lubavitch Chassidut, that there are two kinds of tzaddikim, those in the category of Leviathan and those in the category of Shor Habar, the ox of the plains, the buffalo or the Behemoth. Leviathan comes from the word levaya, accompaniment, and represents connection. And it represents the tzaddikim that are involved primarily in spiritual unifications, yichudim. The Leviathan is a fish from the sea, which represents the hidden spiritual realm. An example of this kind of tzaddik would be Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai during his 13 years inside a cave with his son Elazar. There, Rabbi Shimon, there Rabbi Shimon and his son performed the mitzvot in a spiritual way only. The Arizal was also a Leviathan type of tzaddik, as was the Baal Shem Tov as well. The Shor Habar, the ox of the outside plains, namely the buffalo, the Behemoth, represents tzaddikim that are involved primarily with the practical, physical mitzvot. Shor means an ox, and there is a saying that in Proverbs, Rav Tivuot b'koach hashor, an abundance of produce is in the strength of an ox. Great produce comes from the strength of the ox. There's a special advantage to souls that are called the beasts of the land, as we see in the heavenly chariot, which had images of animals like the ox. And the loftier one's spiritual source, the deeper into physicality it falls. Man is dependent on the food he eats because in truth, the food comes from a higher spiritual source than himself. Even tzaddikim in the Leviathan category have to perform the divine service of physical mitzvot, unless there is decree from above, as in the case of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. In the desert, the Jews' spiritual services was that of the Leviathan, tzaddikim, spiritual in nature. As they were now about to enter the service that involved physicality as well, they needed special assistance from above to receive additional strength. That was in fact the main purpose of Moshe sending out the spies, in order to receive additional strength from above in order to be involved in the service of Shor Habar tzaddikim as well. This specifically had to come from Moshe, who was completely nullified to God and could sense the higher level of involvement in the physical world. That is why our sages explain Moshe longed so much to enter the land of Israel, to be able to perform the physical mitzvot connected to the land itself. The spies, although kosher individuals, did not have this same level of nullification. They did not sense the holiness of this service, and instead claimed that the land devoured its inhabitants. It made them physical like the land itself. Two of the spies, however, Caleb and Joshua, understood that it was in fact possible to elevate the physicality of the land. These two spies were only able to come to this conclusion because they themselves were nullified to Moshe. The Rebbe also compares the mission of the spies that Moshe sent to those later sent by Joshua. Moshe's spies explored the entire land and the 7 Canaanite nations that lived there, and that is compared to the divine service of the tzaddik to fix the 7 sephirot in their essence. The mission of the spies of Joshua, however, is connected to the Benoni, the intermediary, and they only scouted Jericho, which comes from the word reach, smell, yirecho, and represents the rectification of only the outer garments of the soul, its thought, speech, and deed. In summary, the Tanya teaches that there are two kinds of service, that of the tzaddik, completely righteous, that of the Benoni. The heart of the tzaddik is like a land that has been completely conquered. There is no other, therefore there is no struggle. The heart of the Benoni is like a single land with two competing governments, only one of which is preoccupied with Jewish causes. Neither should the Benoni delude himself and think he is a tzaddik, nor should the fact that he is a Benoni make him sad in any way, for it's exactly in this struggle that God finds the greatest joy. The Benoni should also not ignore the other or even fail to help him in his time of need. On the contrary, who should raise the other and bring him along in the service of God. The land of Israel today is like the heart of a Benoni. With that, we conclude the words of the Lubavitcher Rebbe discussing the concept of the Leviathan and of the Behemoth as understood by the Kabbalah. And with that, to turn with its concluding words about the difference between the tzaddik, the righteous person, and the Benoni, which is the great majority of us who are intermediate people with our struggles. Here we are standing at the end of the book of Job after a most amazing and enormous feast of wisdom over these months that we've studied chapter by chapter, this awesome work with its beautiful structure from its beginning narrative about Job described as being pure and righteous, and God with the angels of the heavenly court addressing the Satan, have you seen my servant Job, and sending off Satan to prove Job, and then the disasters that befall him, and Job sits down to the ground and curses his day. From then, with this exquisite introduction, we have section by section discourses that in the course of Job truly express in the sublime heights of biblical Hebrew the pain and suffering of a person who is undergoing actual physical suffering. So many depictions of the sleeplessness, the restlessness, the enduring agonies of his pain, his cries. And Job, of course, because of his quest for God, was searching for meaning in this, as indeed all of us are faced by this. Tzaddikim or Benonim, righteous or intermediaries, we're all searching for an answer to the question of why is there this terrible suffering, which is evident and visible in the world today all around us. The suffering that is caused by man against man, the violent exploitation, the intimidation, the exploitation economically, and in other ways, the abuse of power, the abuse of authority, and the neglect of the poor, the neglect of the needy, all of which are depicted through the book of Job. We face this across the world, not to speak about the physical suffering of those who are sick, those who have inexplicable illnesses, those who have been injured, those who have been in so-called accidents, those who have suffered from actual attacks, all of this suffering going on, and we are at a loss to explain it. And in the course of this debate that goes through the book of Job with the answers of the three companions in their 3 cycles of addresses to Job, then Job's final, very lengthy summation. We've had all sides of this issue looked at, the address, the answer to the Benoni, the intermediate person, which comes from the first 3 companions, although they were required to receive atonement by God for their having failed in their mission, as we discussed on the basis of the Meforshim, the commentators, in our previous session. Despite that, they're all prophets, all enumerated as prophets to the nations, and every word that they say is true. It's just that they did not get to the depth of the matter, and they were not able to provide a satisfactory answer to Job. But all their words were true, and we see there from their words that indeed suffering may come upon a person as a punishment in this world for their deeds, and that the answer is that we have to repent from our deeds. And yet there are inexplicable questions related to the subject of suffering that bother all of us and are challenges to our faith. And these are the questions that Job refuses to accept facile and specious and superficial answers to. And he's not satisfied with any of the moralistic answers of his 3 companions, Eliphaz and Bildad and Sophar, because they do not address the suffering for which there is no seeming explanation on account of any lapse or evil or wickedness or sin on the part of the person suffering. And Job refuses to accept any of the answers given. This is part of the refreshing breath we receive from the book of Job, that we're allowed to ask questions. Indeed, God challenges Job with 50 questions. And Job was all the time asking questions, the most searching of all questions, and refusing to remain silent until he receives satisfactory answers. And we've seen that it's from the teachings of Elihu, the prophecy of Elihu, that Job becomes satisfied because he no more answers. Elihu prepares Job for his final ascent to the heights of prophecy. Prior to that, Job, at the height of his discourses, concluding the round of debates with the companions who have fallen silent, and Job, from after their silence in the concluding chapters up until chapter 32, there Job protesting his innocence and addressing his companions. He again and again attests his innocence with no ability to fathom these questions. It's Elihu who gives him the answers that cause him to stop. Job had left us with the thought that his search is for wisdom, his search is for chokhmah. Nothing is more precious than chokhmah. The very beautiful passages there where Job speaks in praise of chokhmah. And it's then that Elihu now raises Job to the level of chokhmah. And this wisdom is available to us all through the help of our Meforshim, who explained to us how Elihu added what was not said in the answers of the 3 companions that spoke earlier. That is, that suffering are sent to arouse the person, to arouse and stir the person, to make cheshbon nefesh, to make deep and careful self-scrutiny, to ask, where am I? What is my goal? What is my purpose? What should my purpose be? How can I make my deeds and my thoughts and my feelings all consonant to my true purpose? All of this is the cheshbon nefesh that we are invited to carry out when we receive the knocks and blows that life sends, that God sends our way. And the true answer to Job's questions was an appreciation for the awesomeness of God, who supervises every detail of his kingdom, every detail of his universe. If the book of Iyov is about one thing, it is through confrontation with the deepest question of our existence, why do people suffer when at the end everybody dies. The book of Job is a teaching about God, about man's existential relation with God. And at the end of the book, Job's last words are, "V'nichamti al ofo v'efer." I have found consolation over afar, over earth, and efer, over ashes, which, as we see, is explained by the Meforshim to mean that Job found comfort in the fact that after the grave comes the gemul, comes the requital of merits to the righteous that have suffered in this world. God will remain faithful out of God's kindness and God's mercy. All of this we've seen brought out from the stark Hebrew verses of the Hebrew text of Job by our Meforshim, by Rashi, by Metzudat David, and by Ramban and other supplementary commentaries from the other sources. So with all of the Torah, we must go over and over, having plowed the land and sowed the seeds. We must plow again. We must work over the land and go again and again over this remarkable work. Let us not forget the book of Iyov, which can provide us with so much support and so much comfort in the challenges that we go through, to learn that the challenges that are sent to us are not without meaning, that everything is sent to us by God with a meaning and with a purpose, and even the harsh things in life are all sent to us with a purpose that is only from His love and His compassion for our ultimate welfare. So to strengthen ourselves with the faith and the profound wisdom, the unfathomable wisdom contained in this holy work, and be able to study Iyov over and over again and bring the words of wisdom into our very souls and provide us with hope, with a foundation for faith and for the spreading of God's love in the world. With that, my dear friends, we conclude our study of Sefer Iyov, and with that we conclude our studies in our Kollel for this year, which started last Tammuz and is now, as we stand on the threshold of the month of Tammuz, now is drawing to an end, and I'll be taking a break in the coming 2 months for myself, for a spiritual retreat and cheshbon nefesh, and for re-energizing with the help of God, and for conducting some business that I've been too busy until now to conduct. So with that, let me remind you that with the help of God, the plan is to resume the Kollel studies on Sunday, August 27th, corresponding to the 5th of Elul. Haba alinu tova, let it come to us for good. And in the meanwhile, this coming Sunday, June the 25th, there will, with the help of God, be a Shavuot Tov live hookup at 1800 hours Israel time and corresponding times elsewhere in the world. And with that, I would like to wish you Shabbat Shalom now for the coming weekend, and this coming Shabbat also Friday night, Saturday night and Sunday are Rosh Chodesh Tammuz. The new moon of the month of Tammuz, the 30th day of Sivan, is on Shabbat, and the first day of Tammuz is on Sunday. And on the 1st of Tammuz, as I say, on the 25th of June, God willing, there will be a Shavuot Tov weekly hookup at 1800 hours Israel time. With that, Shalom from the holy city of Jerusalem. Shabbat Shalom V'rach, a good and a blessed Shabbat, and Shavuot Tov U'Mevarach, a good and a blessed Chodesh Tov V'rach, a good and a blessed month, and Shabbat Shalom V'rach, a good and a blessed Shabbat.